We all have secrets. But some are so dark, so unexpected, they can destroy everything in an instant. I never imagined my own stepson would be hiding something like this. Not under my roof, not after everything we'd been through together. That night, I walked into his room looking for my charger. What I found instead? A piece of paper folded neatly inside an old book. And it shattered the image I had of him. My heart dropped. It wasn't just what he'd done. It was what he was planning to do next that chilled me to my core. I remember the exact moment I walked into that house for the first time. It smelled like cedarwood and old memories. Daniel, my husband of just 2 months, held my hand tightly, reassuring me with a warm smile. But my attention wasn't on him. It was on the quiet boy standing at the foot of the stairs. Ryan. 17. His face was unreadable, his posture guarded. He nodded politely when introduced, but his eyes barely met mine. I offered a soft hello. He muttered one back and retreated upstairs, his footsteps barely making a sound. The silence that followed him felt louder than it should have. I told myself it was normal. After all, I was the new presence in a house that had known a different kind of love before me. I didn't expect him to embrace me with open arms. Still, the distance between us wasn't just physical. It was layered, fragile, cautious, and deeply rooted in something I couldn't yet name. Daniel often spoke about how quiet Ryan had become since his mother passed away 2 years ago. He didn't like to talk much. Didn't go out unless it was necessary. He kept to his room, immersed in books and headphones, speaking only when spoken to. Daniel worried, but respected Ryan's way of coping. I wanted to respect it too. But I also knew that grief left invisible bruises, and if no one reached out, they could turn into scars. So I tried. Not all at once. Little things. I'd leave him a cup of hot chocolate outside his door on rainy evenings. I cooked meals he liked, based on what Daniel had told me. I'd compliment the music softly playing from his room, or mention a book I'd noticed he was reading. Each time he responded with a nod or a quiet thanks, and nothing more. It was progress, I told myself. Small cracks in the wall. But there were signs. Subtle ones. He kept a notebook with him at all times, always tucked under his arm or in his backpack. He never left it unattended. When Daniel and I watched TV in the evening, Ryan would occasionally sneak out through the back door. Not loudly, not suspiciously, but just disappear. He always came back an hour or two later. Quietly, always through the same door. I asked Daniel once if he knew where Ryan went. He just shook his head. Probably just needs space. I let it go, but it sat in my thoughts longer than I expected. What was he doing? Where was he going? Was he okay? One night I couldn't sleep. The wind outside howled gently against the window, and something inside me stirred. I heard the back door creak, softly, as if someone was trying not to wake the house. My heart beat faster. I didn't intend to follow, but my feet moved before I made the decision. Barefoot, I stepped onto the cold floor and peeked through the kitchen blinds. There he was. Hoodie up, head down, clutching that same notebook. He walked toward the edge of the garden, where shadows swallowed him whole. I stood frozen for a moment, unsure what to do. But something about his loneliness gripped me. It wasn't rebellion or secrecy that defined his movements. It was sorrow. Something unspoken. I told myself I'd only follow far enough to make sure he was safe. Nothing more. That night, I discovered something I hadn't expected. Not a secret that would shock the world. Not a mystery begging to be solved. But a truth wrapped tightly in silence. A truth Ryan had been carrying quietly, painfully, and entirely alone. And I knew then that whatever it wasn't meant to be uncovered with confrontation. It needed to be held gently, like a fragile thing hoping not to break. I followed him, careful not to step too hard on the gravel. The night was still, the air thick with something I couldn't quite name. Tension, maybe, or anticipation. Ryan moved with purpose, unaware of me a short distance behind. He stopped at the old garden shed near the back fence, one I had assumed was long abandoned. He unlocked it, slipped inside, and pulled the door closed. I waited. A minute passed. Then 2. Finally, I stepped closer and gently pushed the door open just enough to see inside. What I found made me pause. The shed wasn't empty. It was filled with drawings pinned to the walls, stacks of old photo albums, candles that had melted and reformed over time. In the center was a small wooden table, cluttered with pens, scissors, tape, a scrapbook, and that ever-present notebook. It was a shrine, not of worship but of memory. Soft pencil sketches of a woman I recognized from framed photos in the hallway. His mother. Her eyes, her hands, her smile, drawn over and over again, like he was trying to remember her perfectly. He sat with his back to me, hunched over the table. I should have walked away, but I couldn't. I knocked lightly on the doorframe. He turned startled and our eyes met. He didn't say a word, but the expression on his face wasn't anger. It was fear. Fear that I'd found something too personal, too sacred. I stepped in slowly and whispered, "You don't have to explain. I just wanted to understand." He looked down, eyes on the notebook. Silence stretched between us, but it didn't feel cold anymore. It felt full, of emotion, of thoughts, of things he didn't know how to say. Eventually he spoke. "She used to bring me here when I was little. We'd plant seeds. She called it our secret space." He picked up a photograph. "After she died, I started coming back. I didn't want to forget what her voice sounded like, or the way she laughed." He handed me the scrapbook. I opened it carefully. Inside were pressed flowers, a dried birthday card, small doodles, scraps of fabric from a dress. Each page was a piece of love kept alive through time. And in the back, poems, handwritten, raw, honest. They weren't just about grief. They were about longing, guilt, confusion, and hope. His handwriting was uneven, smudged in places, as if tears had fallen while he wrote. He looked at me again. I was scared if I smiled too much, it would mean I didn't miss her enough. And if I let anyone else in, it would mean I was replacing her. I sat beside him, saying nothing at first. My own memories of loss rose quietly, different faces, different places, but the same ache. I told him about the journal I kept for my mother, who passed when I was his age. I still wrote to her sometimes, when I needed to talk to someone who wouldn't answer, but would understand. His eyes softened. A kind of relief passed over his face. Not because I had solved anything, but because I hadn't tried to. I just listened. He handed me the notebook. "This is where I write when I feel like I can't talk." I didn't open it. I just nodded. Something shifted between us in that moment. Not a dramatic change. No declarations. But something real. A beginning. Trust maybe. Or at least the willingness to try. We didn't talk much after that. Just sat quietly, side by side, surrounded by memories and candlelight. I knew then that I hadn't just stumbled upon a secret. I had been invited, wordlessly, cautiously, into a part of his world he hadn't shown anyone else. After that night, something in him changed. It was subtle, almost invisible to anyone else, but I felt it. The next morning, he greeted me with a quiet morning, instead of the usual silence. At dinner, he stayed a few minutes longer at the table. He didn't say much, but he didn't rush off either. Every small shift mattered. He began leaving the shed door open, even when he was inside. I never intruded unless invited, but the gesture felt like a silent offering. One afternoon, he called me over, pointing to a half-cleared patch of dirt beside the shed. "She wanted to plant roses here," he said. "We never got to it." His voice was steady, but the meaning behind the words lingered. I asked if he wanted help. He nodded once. Over the next few weeks, we turned that forgotten corner into something beautiful. We planted roses, daisies, and marigolds, flowers she had loved. He chose each one, telling me small stories as we worked. "She said marigolds looked like tiny suns," he once smiled. That was the first time I saw a real smile on his face. Not forced. Not polite. Just real. Daniel noticed the change too. He didn't ask questions but started spending more time outside with us, helping clear the space, bringing lemonade, listening. He knew, as I did, that this wasn't just a garden. It was Ryan's way of healing. And maybe ours too. One rainy evening, Ryan knocked on our bedroom door. He had something in his hand, a poem, folded and carefully pressed. "Can I read you something?" he asked. Daniel looked surprised, but said yes right away. Ryan stood near the doorway, cleared his throat, and began to read. It wasn't a poem just about grief. It was about remembering without holding on too tight. About letting light in without feeling guilty. The last line stayed with me. Love doesn't leave, it just changes where it lives. His voice trembled at the end, but he didn't cry. And when he finished, he looked at both of us, not with hesitation, but with trust. Daniel walked over and hugged him tightly. I joined a second later. That was the first time we stood like a family. No roles, no walls, just three people bound by something deeper than titles. From that night on, Ryan began sharing more. Bits of his day, songs he liked, questions about my life before I met his dad. I didn't push. I simply answered, and sometimes asked back. He started calling me by name more often, even once slipping in a quiet thanks for everything when I packed him lunch. In return, I let go of my need to be seen as a stepmother or caretaker. I just tried to be present, consistent. He didn't need another parent. He needed someone to meet him where he was. One Sunday afternoon, he handed me a new drawing. It was of the garden we'd built together, complete with tiny details, the bird feeder, the cracked stepping stones, the swing we'd added. At the center, three figures stood side by side. I didn't say anything. I just smiled and placed it gently in a frame. Healing didn't come in a dramatic wave. It came in the quiet, over shovels in the dirt, shared stories, long silences that weren't uncomfortable anymore. It wasn't about erasing pain, but about making space for joy beside it. The boy who once lived in silence now walked with a lightness in his step. And every time I saw him glance at the garden before leaving for school, I knew we had built more than a space for flowers. We had built something none of us knew we were missing. A year passed quietly, each season leaving behind small reminders of how far we'd come. The garden was now full and colorful, a living memory we all cared for. Ryan was different. He laughed more, joked occasionally, and spoke with a calmness that hadn't been there before. The heaviness in his eyes had softened. He still carried his memories, but they no longer weighed him down. They grounded him. The day of his graduation arrived. He stood tall in his gown, a quiet pride in his posture. Daniel beamed beside me, unable to stop smiling. We had planned a small celebration for after the ceremony, nothing extravagant, just close friends and a few neighbors. But before we left, I handed Ryan a gift wrapped in brown paper. He looked confused but took it gently. "Open it when you're ready," I said. That evening, as the sky turned orange with the setting sun, Ryan approached me with the book in his hand. It was a photo album I had made, filled with pictures of us planting the garden, pages from his poems, the ones he'd shared, a few old photos of his mother I had carefully included, and drawings he'd given me. On the front cover, I had written, "From what was lost to what we've grown." He flipped through it slowly, carefully, pausing at a photo of him and Daniel laughing beside the first rose bush we planted. He didn't say much. Just a soft, "Thank you," that carried more weight than 100 words. I didn't expect more. Later that night, as everyone gathered in the backyard, Daniel raised a toast. Before he could say anything, Ryan stood up, surprising us all. He looked at everyone, then at Daniel, then at me. There was a time I didn't think I'd ever feel okay again. After my mom passed, I shut everything out. I thought if I let anyone in, I'd be betraying her. I thought healing meant forgetting. But it doesn't. Healing means remembering without hurting every time. And sometimes, it means letting new people into your life, even when you're scared to. He paused, then looked directly at me. "You never tried to take her place. You never forced anything. You were just there. And in being there, you gave me space to come back to myself. Thank you for that." I felt my throat tighten, but I managed a smile. Daniel reached for my hand, and we sat there, silent and full. There was nothing more I needed in that moment. The night ended with laughter, music, and quiet conversations. I watched Ryan speaking with an old neighbor, talking about his plans for college, his interest in art, maybe even teaching someday. His eyes sparkled with something I hadn't seen before, direction. In the days that followed, we fell back into our simple routines. But everything felt fuller, lighter, realer. The quiet mornings, the shared dinners, the casual conversations. None of it was forced anymore. It was just life slowly unfolding. One morning, as I sipped coffee by the window, Ryan walked past the garden and paused. He reached down to touch one of the marigolds, then looked up toward the sky. No words. Just a moment of connection. A boy remembering, healing, and moving forward, all at once. I used to think love had to be dramatic, filled with grand gestures or romantic declarations. But I learned it can be quiet, steady, and honest. It can show up in the form of a shared silence, a framed drawing, a poem read aloud when no one expects it. It can grow, even in places touched by grief. That night when I discovered what Ryan had been hiding, I thought I was stepping into something delicate. But really, I was stepping into the beginning of a love that had room for all of us. A love built not by blood, but by patience, presence, and the courage to simply stay.